So today I want to talk about the word mental. I am very intrigued by this concept, and I'm also very interested in the transformation that it has gone through. But let's first look at the root of the words, the etymology, the pedigree of the word. It comes to us from Latin and from late Latin, and it means basically mind or anything that's pertaining to the mind. So originally, the word doesn't mean anything negative. But what happened over time is we started using the word mental in order to say, well, that person is a little bit off their head, or they're a little bit bonkers, or they're a little bit crazy. So it acquired a negative meaning in the modern world. And that meaning troubles me. Why do we associate things that come from the mind with that kind of negativity? Although that said, I think that association is changing lately. And that is thanks to people, to brave people who are sharing their stories, their personal stories in the public space. We need to talk about mental health. And when we do that, we need to bear in mind that this is a subject that doesn't only affect some people on the periphery of the society, but in fact, in reality, it affects all of us, people of all age groups, all backgrounds. So we need to open up these conversations, and there has to be inclusion, there has to be respect, there has to be dignity. Each and every story has to be treated with respect. It bothers me that sometimes in mainstream rhetoric, mental health is regarded as something that so-called losers suffer from. People who can't make it, people who are not successful in real life. What does that mean? What is the measurement of success? The age we're living in, I think in many ways, is the age of angst. There's almost like an existential anxiety affecting all of us. And that is very understandable, because this is an age in which we are seeing, as we're speaking right now, we're seeing climate destruction accelerating. It's the age of pandemics. Also, it's the age of growing, deepening, and widening inequalities. So many people feel voiceless. So many people feel left out or left behind. So there's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain. There's also a lot of inherited pain that we're not capable of talking about. And all those emotions matter. These emotions need to be honored. They cannot be belittled. Feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling down from time to time does not mean you are weak. It cannot be associated with weakness. Just like compassion cannot be associated with weakness. Just like empathy cannot be associated with weakness. So we need to dismantle these negative concepts that we have in the mainstream rhetoric and talk about emotions, talk about mental health in a completely new way, opening up conversations. And I think it's very important when people can say, you know what, right now I'm not feeling that well. This idea that we all have to be all the time, we have to be perfect and on top of the game and constantly smiling and constantly full of hope and energy. It's a myth. It's an illusion. There is no such thing. And what social media is doing, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, overall, across the board, what social media is doing is creating this illusion that there are some people out there who are incredibly successful, who are incredibly perfect and happy and joyful all the time. And we know deep inside that is not true. But because of this bombardment of images, we keep thinking, well, if I can't be like that, then what's wrong with me? And I think it's time to remember that there's nothing wrong with you, because that is not real. And the reality is we all fall down, we get up, we try to lick our wounds, heal ourselves. We all have bruises, we all have scars, and we learn from each other's stories. So instead of just flowing along this imagery of perfection, I'd rather have honest conversations about mental health, whether it's anxiety or depression or just not feeling energetic. Some days you feel like you don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes some days you feel like you don't want to be engaged, and that also is very human. But at the same time, I think we need to find stories that motivate us, stories that inspire us. And that is going to come to us from our fellow human beings. That is going to come when we remember that we're citizens of humankind. So the story of maybe someone living in Brazil, or someone living in Afghanistan, someone living in Iran, they're going to give me motivation. Or maybe, someone else's story in a completely different part of the world will give you inspiration. And for that, we need to remain connected. Rather than becoming atomized individuals, we have to reconnect. I also find it very important that we reconnect with nature. Just appreciating sitting under a tree, walking amidst plants, inhaling that kind of oxygen, not taking it for granted, appreciating the soil, seemingly small things also changes our perspective. And thirdly, I think we need to reconnect with ourselves. We need to understand that every self is composed of multiple voices. There's a huge multiplicity within. And not all of that is perfect. Sometimes we feel down, sometimes we feel up. That complexity is also inside us, and that's okay. So there has to be an inner democracy as well. But what I'm trying to say is we have to reconnect, and we need to honor each other's stories, personal stories, and we need to keep learning from each other. And lastly, I want to question the word mind. We tend to associate mind with only and only intellect. But I think there are different ways of attaining knowledge in life. And the reason why I say this is because of my own grandmother. My grandmother was not a very well-educated woman. She did not have a glowing diploma. In fact, she had not been allowed to have proper education for being a girl. And she was one of the wisest people I've ever known in life. She had attained her knowledge through a different means, maybe through oral stories, a different kind of knowledge, So there are different paths to knowledge. I'm very well aware of that. Also, there are very interesting new discussions about what intellect means. Is it only and only concentrated in our brains, or is the whole human body actually so interconnected that intelligence is everywhere, in the sense that, like in a tree, So now, for instance, we talk about how important gut health is for our mental well-being and overall well-being. So these conversations are shifting. But I think it's very important to bear in mind that there are different types of intelligence, and someone who might be very intelligent in their own field can be not that intelligent when it comes to emotional intelligence. So knowing very well one subject doesn't necessarily make you a very intelligent person in all spheres of life. There's a wider complexity that we need to be aware of. So when we talk about the word mental, I think we need to bear in mind that there's a huge complexity out there. And when we share our stories, when we stop judging people, when we stop othernizing people, we can understand that complexity much better.